I woke up again before the sun, not because I wanted to, but because the silence out here has a way of pulling you from sleep like a whisper you can't ignore. I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs groaning beneath my weight, and stared at the floor for a long time. The boards were worn smooth from generations of boots and bare feet. My father's, my grandfather's, mine. Lately, I wonder if I'm the last of us who will ever walk this house. Outside, the wind scraped across the dry fields like sandpaper. I pulled on my boots, still crusted with dust from yesterday's walk, and stepped out onto the porch. The screen door creaked the same way it always had. Funny how some things refuse to change, even when everything else crumbles around them. The sky was pale and empty. Not a single cloud, not even a breath of promise. The land stretched out in front of me, cracked and tired, like it was exhaling its last breath. Once these acres were green and generous, corn as tall as your shoulders, cattle fat and content. My wife, Ellie, used to dance through the wheat fields, barefoot, sun on her face, laughing like there wasn't a care in the world. Now it's just ghosts and silence. Every morning I walk the fence line. That's what my father did, what his father did before him. A ritual, I guess. Not to check the fence so much as to remind yourself the land is still there, that you're still there. The cattle are long gone, sold off one by one till the pen stood empty and accusing. But I still walk, because walking feels like defiance. The barn's roof caved in last spring. I haven't had the heart or the money to fix it. The house leaks when it rains, not that it rains anymore. The well dried up 6 months ago. And the town nearby, it's a ghost of itself, too. The hardware store closed first, then the diner. Last week, the post office shut its doors. People either gave up or moved away. All that's left are boarded windows and dust-covered memories. Sometimes I think the land is mourning with me. Other times I think it's punishing me for staying, for believing, for being too damn stubborn to leave. I came in from the walk with my shirt soaked through in sweat and grief. Sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo I keep by the window. Ellie, smiling in a sun hat, holding the basket of fresh tomatoes. That was the last good summer we had. The summer before her diagnosis. The summer before everything started to fall apart. My fingers brushed over the frame. I whispered to her, like I always do. I'm still trying, Al. And then I heard it, my father's voice, clear as a bell in my memory. The land doesn't give up, so neither do we. I looked out over the brittle fields, clenched my jaw, and stood up straight. I won't let it die, I said aloud. Not just the land, the memories, the blood, the sweat, the love buried in every square inch of this farm. This isn't just dirt, it's who I am. I spent 2 days pacing the porch with a coffee cup that never got refilled, staring out across the fields like they might answer me. I kept hearing Ellie's voice in my head. Sometimes you have to take a risk, even if your hands are shaking. Her hands shook near the end. Mine shake now for different reasons. I called Jim Hartley, the only banker in 3 counties still lending to folks like me. He didn't laugh when I said I needed a loan to drill, but he didn't smile either. You're digging for water in a dust bowl, James, he said, flipping through my faded credit file. I'm not letting this place die, I told him. He sighed like someone who's seen too many stubborn men bury themselves in debt. Still, he signed. Maybe out of pity. Maybe because he remembered my father. I brought in an old rig from Oklahoma, rusty, loud, and barely legal. The guy who ran it, Pete, had hands like tree bark and a cough that said he'd smoked through 2 marriages. I didn't care. I just needed someone willing to tear into this stubborn earth. The drill started on a Monday. By Tuesday, we'd hit nothing but bone-dry limestone. Pete kept shaking his head. "This ground's been bled dry," he muttered. I barely slept. I ate beans from the can. My boots melted into my feet, and my hands blistered from helping haul pipe. Each groan of the drill was like a question. "What are you still doing here, old man?" But I saw Ellie's eyes every time I blinked. I heard my grandfather's war stories. I remembered my father, pouring sweat as he baled hay with a bad back and a broken heart after Mom died. On the third day, Pete's drill shuddered. Not the usual grind or stall, but a groan, like it had struck something different, something alive. We killed the engine and leaned in. A few seconds later, there was a wet burp from the ground. Pete blinked. Well, hell. I rushed forward, heart pounding, but what came up wasn't water. It was thick, black, slow-moving. Oil. I stared at it, stunned. The sun caught the surface just right. It shimmered like tar-covered glass. My throat tightened. This wasn't what I asked for, not what I bled for. Pete whooped and clapped me on the back. "You just struck gold, Carter." But all I could think was, "You can't drink oil." I sat on the tailgate of my truck that night, staring at the patch of oil-streaked dirt where the rig had hit pay dirt. Pete had gone into town to celebrate, but I couldn't make myself move. The air reeked of crude, sharp, metallic, nauseating. The stars blinked overhead, the only witnesses to my confusion. This was supposed to be salvation, a miracle even. But it didn't feel like one. I had drilled for water, prayed for it, dreamed of it. I wanted to feel that first cold splash on my face, see green slowly return to the soil. I wanted to grow something again. Instead, I got this black snake slithering up from the depths, rich and rotten and utterly useless to the dying land. The next morning, word had spread faster than I could shut my door. Oilmen showed up before breakfast, 3 trucks deep, all polished chrome and pressed shirts. They smiled like salesmen at a funeral. "You're sitting at a reservoir, Mr. Carter," one of them said, flicking open a silver case like I should be impressed. "Deep vein, untapped. You're a lucky man." He handed me a check I didn't even look at. I folded it and slid it into my pocket without a word. He talked percentages, royalties, extraction timetables. It was all noise. All I could hear was Ellie's voice in my head saying, "You've always wanted to grow something you could pass on." What the hell was I supposed to pass on now? Oil? I walked them to their trucks without shaking hands. One of them tried to pat my shoulder, but I stepped aside. That night, I sat by the old well, the dry one. I hadn't been there in a while, not since the day it stopped giving. I brought Ellie's photo with me, set it down on the stone rim. I got something, but not what I asked for. I let the silence answer. Then I heard my father's voice again, clear as ever. "The land always gives you something. The question is, what will you do with it?" That's when it hit me. Maybe the oil wasn't the answer, but maybe it was the means. I didn't want wealth. I wanted life. And if this black gold could buy me water, then maybe, just maybe. The offers came fast after that. Men in suits with contracts thick as hay bales. Some offered more than the farm was worth, twice, 3 times over. They all said the same thing. "So, retire. Go live the good life." One even laughed and said, "Hell, Carter, with this kind of money, you could buy yourself a ranch in Montana and let someone else worry about water." But they didn't understand. It wasn't about the money. Never had been. I didn't drill for oil. I drilled for life, for roots and rows, for the feeling of Ellie's fingers brushing mine as we checked tomato vines in the summer, for the sound of my father's boots crunching the earth beside mine. This land, it was family. It was memory. But still, money is money. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't sit there for days with a bottle and those contracts, wondering if I should just take the damn deal. Maybe I was the fool. Maybe trying to save a dying farm was just another way of refusing to accept the truth. Then, one morning, I stepped out onto the porch, and the wind carried the faintest whisper of dust and something else, a smell I hadn't noticed in years. The faint scent of soil warming under the promise of change. That's when I made the call. Not to sell, but to spend. I used the first round of oil money to bring in engineers. Real ones. Not the kind who shook their heads and said no chance. These men brought satellite maps, moisture sensors, and blueprints. I told them I didn't want oil rigs lining my fence line. I wanted wells, deep ones. I wanted drip lines, irrigation trenches, reservoirs. The lead guy raised his eyebrows. You sure you want to spend your capital on this? I nodded. I'm not interested in capital. I'm interested in crops. It took months. The drilling wasn't easy. Rocky ground, unpredictable layers, but money buys time and expertise. And eventually, one of the new wells struck. Then another. Cold, clean water bubbled up from the depths, like the land had been holding its breath all this time, waiting for someone to believe in it again. I stood there that day, soaked and filthy, watching water rush into the first holding tank. And I laughed. Really laughed. The kind of laugh that pulls up out of your ribs, wet with gratitude and something close to relief. I touched the soil by the tank, rubbed it between my fingers. It was damp. Not mud yet, but not dust either. A beginning. The next week, I drove to the seed store 2 counties over, bought every damn sack of beans, tomatoes, and corn I could fit in the back of the truck. The man at the counter stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But I knew this much. I wasn't here to get rich off oil. I was here to make something grow. The first time I saw green shoot through the dirt again, I cried so hard I had to lean against the fence post to catch my breath. It started as a thin row, just a line of young corn breaking the soil. Fragile, pale, but alive. God, it was alive. I knelt in the dirt, touched the sprouts with calloused fingers, and whispered, "Thank you." I don't know who I was talking to, Ellie, my father, the land itself, but it didn't matter. It was all the same. Water flowed now, not like it used to, but enough. I had trenches running through half the east fields, and the soil had begun to listen. I could smell it in the mornings, that sweet, earthy scent of possibility. I planted more. Tomatoes, beans, peppers, just a few rows each. It wasn't about scale. It was about proving to myself this place still had something left to give. But I didn't stop there. I remembered the Petersons down the road. They'd packed up last fall, left their fields fallow and their barn half collapsed. Their oldest, Marcy, had left for college, and their boy, Ethan, was working construction upstate. I called Ethan. "Your land still sitting idle?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Why?" "I've got water. If you're willing to come back, I'll help you get it flowing." He thought I was joking. When he realized I wasn't, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My dad, he thought no one cared anymore." "I care," I told him. A week later, Ethan was back, and I had a crew laying pipe from my reservoir to his fields. That became the beginning of something I never expected. Word spread, not about the oil, but the water. Real, usable water. Some folks came just to see it for themselves, like it was some kind of miracle. Others asked if I could help them too, and I did. I laid more pipe, called in more rigs, built reservoirs that could serve not just me, but neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. It wasn't charity. It was healing. Mrs. Calhoun brought over fresh bread the first time her garden sprouted again. The Delgados held a little Sunday picnic near the churchyard after their orchard started blooming for the first time in 5 years. Kids ran through the sprinklers. Laughter returned to this place. Timid at first, like it didn't trust the land not to betray us again. But the land was listening, responding. I stood one evening by the main irrigation line, watching the water flow beneath the setting sun. For the first time in a long time, the sky had clouds again. Big ones, thick and promising. I looked at the photo of Ellie I kept in my shirt pocket. "We're getting there," I whispered, "one row at a time."
The summer stretched on, and the land kept giving back, slowly, stubbornly, like it had been waiting for someone to believe in it again. One morning, while the crew laid new irrigation lines near the edge of the west field, an area we hadn't touched since before Ellie passed, one of the younger workers, Marcus, called out, "Mr. Carter, you might want to see this." I wiped the sweat from my neck and walked over. He pointed to a large, rust-covered object unearthed beneath the old well. It looked like a metal chest, its edges warped, the lock long corroded. The soil around it was damp, not from the well, but from the recent water lines we'd laid. If we hadn't dug just a few inches deeper, we would have missed it entirely. We hauled it out together. I brushed off the dirt, my heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and curiosity. I hadn't seen this chest before, and I knew every inch of this land. I pried it open with a crowbar, the metal groaning like it was waking up from a long sleep. Inside, wrapped in a moth-eaten wool blanket, were old photographs, letters, and a leather-bound journal. The top photo stopped my breath. My grandfather, young and proud, standing in front of the house, his hand resting on the same porch beam that still stood today. The journal had his name embossed on the cover, Thomas Carter. I sat down in the dirt, dust coating my jeans, and opened to the first page. If someone finds this, it means the land has spoken again. It always does if you're patient. I buried this not to hide it, but to remember. This land isn't just a place. It's a promise. His handwriting was tight and elegant, full of the kind of wisdom that only comes from years of sweat and loss. He wrote of droughts, of failed seasons, of nearly giving up, but never walking away. Page after page, he poured out his fears, his faith, his pride in the family that had held this land together through 2 wars, 3 recessions, and countless storms. Then, halfway through, I read words that shattered something in me. "Do not let it go, James. You were always meant for this. This land chose you the moment you took your first steps on it. Remember that when it gets too hard, when the world tells you to quit." I blinked hard, jaw clenched. I hadn't known he wrote this for me. Hadn't even known he believed in me like that. I carried the journal home like it was made of glass. That night I read it cover to cover by lantern light, Ellie's photo beside me, my father's old hat hanging on the wall. And when I closed the final page, I finally understood. This fight I'd been waging, the isolation, the pain, the stubborn hope, it wasn't just mine. It never had been. It was inherited. And now it was mine to carry forward. After I found Granddad's journal, something shifted in me. It was like I'd been walking blind through a burning house, and suddenly someone handed me a map. His words had lit a fire under my ribs, not the kind that burned things down, but the kind that warms your bones and makes you move again. I stopped thinking small. For months, I'd been focused on keeping my farm alive, helping a few neighbors here and there. But the truth is, this wasn't just about me, or even my land. It was about all of us, about a town that had been drying up for years while we all kept our heads down and waited for someone else to fix it. Well, I had oil, and now I had purpose. So I started making calls, real ones, not just to the neighbors I'd known for decades, but to folks I hadn't spoken to in years. The principal at the shuttered school, the pastor whose church now sat empty on Sundays, the kids who'd moved away and sworn never to return. I told them all the same thing. There's water here now. Come back. Let's build something again. At first, most of them thought I'd lost it. I couldn't blame them. They'd seen too much taken, too many promises broken. But then they came and saw the irrigation, the green rows, the working wells. They felt the earth shift under their boots and realized this place wasn't dead yet. So we started slow. A handful of us patched the roof on the old general store. We cleaned out the school gym, fixed the plumbing, and ran new lines from our reservoir. I donated the money, sure, but more than that, I gave them something none of us had in a long time, a reason to hope. By summer's end, we had a functioning co-op, a food pantry that actually had food, and kids playing on the same ball field that had once grown weeds taller than them. The church reopened with a busted speaker and folding chairs. I sat in the back row with tears in my eyes while the congregation sang louder than I'd heard in decades. And then, against all odds, we brought back the Harvest Festival. It had been 10 years since the last one. I remember because it was the same year Ellie got sick. The banners were faded, the music scratchy, but people came. They came from 3 towns over. They danced on cracked pavement, grilled corn from my fields, and passed around jars of homemade pickles and jam like we'd never stopped doing it. I stood there in the middle of it all, wearing my father's old hat, and watched the town come back to life. Not in a rush, not with fireworks or fanfare, but in a slow, steady rhythm, like a heart learning to beat again. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like the last man standing. I felt like the first of many returning. The mornings come slower now. I wake up with more aches than dreams, and the walk to the porch takes a little longer than it used to. But when I step out and see the rows of green stretching to the horizon, the silver flash of water dancing through the irrigation lines, I know I did right by this land, and by those who came before me. Some days I catch myself talking to the ghosts again. Ellie, mostly. My father, granddad. I tell them what's been done, what's growing, who's returned. I like to think they hear me. They're proud, maybe even smiling. But nothing shook me like the knock on the door that August morning. I opened it, and there he was, Samuel, my boy. He looked older than I remembered, taller, leaner, tired in the eyes. It had been 7 years since we last spoke, not since Ellie's funeral. He blamed me for staying on this land while she faded away in that hospital bed. I'd blamed him for running. He stood there in silence, holding a duffel bag and a single photograph. It was one of Ellie, standing in the tomato rows, laughing, just like the one I kept in the kitchen. He said, "I saw what you've done. Didn't believe it until I drove through town." I didn't know what to say. Didn't trust my voice not to crack. He looked past me at the fields, the house, the horizon, then back at me. "I want to help." We worked side by side for weeks. No big talks, just fence mending, equipment repairs, and hauling crates to the co-op. The rhythm of sweat and silence did what words couldn't.
And one night, as we sat on the porch sipping sweet tea and watching the sun dip below the hills, he finally spoke. "This place, it's not just yours anymore. It's mine too, if you'll let it be." I nodded, swallowed the knot in my throat. "It always was, son." The next day, he took Granddad's journal off the shelf and started reading it by lantern light, just like I had. And I knew right then I wouldn't be the last Carter to walk this land after all. We started drawing up plans, expanding irrigation, building a small education center for sustainable farming. Samuel's idea. Said it was time the town became more than a memory. Said we had something worth teaching. The oil still flows, quietly now, managed, careful. It funds the work, but it doesn't define us. What defines us is the soil under our nails, the history in our blood, and the people who returned when the land did. Legacy isn't just something you protect, it's something you pass on.